Hello everyone, welcome to the new series from Huckstack Tutorials. In this set, I'll try to teach you how to write code in React. And we start with very simple applications like this one, the Hello World. And then in future tutorials, we'll gradually move toward the very complex application and the things that you might need day to day for development in React. So let's jump into the first application that is just create a hello world, and it's very simple. It just shows the hello world in the middle of the screen, but we will learn only the setup and all of the requirements for creating the baseline of React application. So what is included? We will first install Node, and we learn how to install Node, and then we create the Hello World app. And since it's kind of like standard or best practice to use TypeScript instead of JavaScript, so we will learn how to use TypeScript with React. And then we also, instead of using CSS file for styling, we use S.
Okay, the first tool that we need is Node.js, and you can download this application from this URL, nodejs.org. And if you go to the download tab, you will see the links for downloading, and based on your operating system, you can click on either of these links and it will download the installer, and you can install it on your machine.
Okay, now after installing Node, you're ready to install and set up React. There are multiple ways to do that, but the easiest way is to using create React app package. So there's a website for it, and the documentation is very rich. So as you can see, this documentation and the website URL and top of here, create-react-app.dev. So you can read the documentation for all of the capabilities that this package has. But all we need for now is just this line of code that can install the React application. So you can paste it here, and you can just rename the application that you want. For us, it's Hello World. So I can just say hello-world, and then I can hit enter, and it will install the application for me. So after installation, I'll come back and we will see the files that it creates.
Okay, now it installed React application on our machine, but before moving forward, I wanted to mention something about the command that we just ran, and it's about the last part of it. As you can see, it says template TypeScript. We could remove this part and have our application in JavaScript, but it's a best practice to use TypeScript instead of JavaScript, and that's why I use this template for our development. Just wanted to mention this part. And once you install this create React app, you can just use any IDE for development. I know some people use VS Code, but I prefer WebStorm. Some other people just use some text editor like Sublime, but I like WebStorm for some of the features and functionality that it comes with it. And as you can see, it creates our Hello World application, and there are some files and folders here. I will not go over all of them to confuse you, but the very main one is package.json. And if you don't understand the items inside of it, don't worry about it. The only thing that you need to know for now is just this script, which is start. There are some dependencies that if you open this, you will see all of the dependencies. And what it means that for running the create React application, you need these dependencies, and all of these dependencies are already downloaded in the node modules folder. So these are just things that are happening behind the scene, and I just want to tell you what is going on. Otherwise, you just don't need to know, but it's better to know as a developer. So right now, once you create this and you have the application, you have to move to this folder, the one that we just created here. And I have terminal here. One of the cool things that in WebStorm you can have terminal on the IDE. So you can just start the application by just running npm start, and that is one of the items that you need to know from this package.json in order to run the application. This is the script for it, and when you run start, it basically runs this script. This is a shorthand version of this 3 words. We can just type start and it will start the application. So I'll npm start and it will start the application for us, and you will see the hello world application inside of the browser. So it should open it for us right here. Okay, it usually opens it automatically, but this time I had to open a new tab and give this URL, which is localhost 3000, and it opened our create react app. So where is it getting this template and this design and this view? If we go back to the source code, this is the package.json file that we talked about. There is a folder called src. Inside of this src folder, there is app.tsx. It's tsx because it's TypeScript. And when you open it, if you're familiar with HTML tags, you'll see this file. This is not HTML, this is React tags, but it looks very similar to HTML tag, and you can just simply remove this part, which is here, which is this part, and add your text. You can say hello world, and you save it, and it will automatically, as you can see here, it updates this view for us. And that's the hello world for create react app.
Last thing that I would like to cover is about Sass versus CSS. So by default, when you install create react app, it will use CSS file, and it's not very flexible, and it's not the best practice to use CSS file. You should use Sass files, which can read variables. If you want to get more information about Sass files, you can just Google them. But for now, we just focus on installing it on our application. And installing it is very simple. You can just run npm install Sass. And then instead of importing the CSS file, you can just easily import the Sass file. So if you look at the structure of the application, you'll see the CSS file, as you can see here. And when you open them, you'll see some style sheets. But we need to install Sass. So it's very simple. You just run this command that I showed you, npm install Sass, and it will install it in your package.json here. And you can change this SCSS file to SCSS file. And let's do that. So as you can see, it added to the package file. In the dependency part, it added Sass, and we can turn this one, refactor, rename, and use SCSS file. So same thing for this index file, and yes. So now we need to save the project and making sure that it works fine still in this here. As you can see, it is still working fine, and we use Sass. That was all for creating the Hello World app. This is a basic application that from now on, any application that we want to start or create, this is the base structure of the application. Okay, now let's deep dive into the project structure that Create React app created for us. It added all of the folders and files that we needed, but most of them are extra that we don't need it and we should customize it. Let's start with the first folder that it adds, which is very necessary. It's called node modules. What it is that if you go to the package.json, you will see dependencies. So in order to run this application, we need some third-party libraries. And these are the list of these libraries.
and we need to download them, and each library has its own requirements, own dependencies. So what this npm install does, it will go and grab each library and download it inside of this node module. So whenever we need it, it will just get the files from that folder. So we usually don't modify this folder at all. So it's just there for application, and we don't even use it, add it to the Git. If you're using Git source control, we don't use that and we don't add it, but it's very necessary for application to run the dependencies. So basically we never go to this folder ever. The public folder is all of the files that are public to the application, and when you, for example, publish your website or application, these are the files and folders that everybody can see. And for example, this fave icon is the one that you can see on the top of the screen that comes here usually. I don't see it right now, but basically that's the icon that you see on the top of the
Okay, the
browser.
next file that you see in the public folder is index. In this index file, throughout the application, for React code, we don't change anything here. But for the application itself, we sometimes need some stuff. For example, if you want to bring your website to the search engines on top of the search engines, there are some changes that you have to make here. Or for this example, if you want to change the fave icon that I showed earlier, you can just change it here. Or if you want to add some style sheet for example, Bootstrap, you need to add it in the in the tags of this part. So, but for React development, you never touch this area, and that's it. So let's go to the next one. There are two logo that it adds by itself, so you can just basically delete them, and just whenever it's used in the application, as you can see, maybe this logo that is here, this logo, you can just remove it from the application and it doesn't need it. So these two files are extra, and that was all from the public. These two manifest to JSON and robots, so I don't think that you need them. I never use them, honestly. So basically you never use these two files as well. So let's go to the base part, in the part that you always, for developing React, you need it. And this is SRC folder. In SRC folder, the main part that is running the application is app tsx. And I said that it's tsx, it's because it's using TypeScript. If you're using JavaScript, it will be JSX. And so it looks like HTML tags, but they're not. This is JSX. And in order to make it simple, I can easily remove everything that we have here and add that out our hello world app here. World. So if I save this and then go back to the application, it removed all of the styles and all of the things that were inside of the screen, and it just shows our hello world. That's the very simple thing that we need. And we can just remove this class name even, and it will go back to the, it will not be in the center of the screen anymore because it doesn't have any style right now. In order to add style, we know that we have to go to the CSS file, and for us, we can just remove everything here as well because we want to start from scratch and add some folders that we need for React part. And this is the logo that I mentioned, so we can delete this. And there are some other files here. I see that this is for environments, we don't need it, so I can just easily delete that. Okay, the next file that we don't need is this report web vitals. This is for maybe analytics, that I never use that. So, and the use case of it is, I think it's an index, the tsx, this function. So we can just easily remove this function and these comments, we don't need them. And as you can see, this import will not used anymore, so we can just remove that, and then we can easily
delete this file. So we don't need it. And what else we don't need? So as you can see, there are some errors here. We see that since we removed the logo, we can just remove the logo here. And as I mentioned, we can delete these files as well. So it seems like it is being used, and it's being used inside of the index here. So we can delete this, so it's no longer has any reference to it, and we can do refactor. Okay, so now it's not being used anywhere, so we can easily delete it. So on your side, it's very easy. You can just, I'm using WebStorm, that's why it gives me warning that it's being used somewhere, that it's better to just look at where it's being used and then delete it. But it also gives you warning inside of here as well. So if you run the application, it will show you the details. When I switched to this view, you initially saw there were some errors. So you could see the description and just go back to your application and resolve them. But the cool feature in WebStorm is this gives you warning before even running the application. You can even remove this file. I'm trying to delete as much as possible. So let's see what are the usage of this. It's in the index file, so I can just easily remove this file, and then it's no longer, it's even finding it inside of the comments, so it's fine if it's in the comments. So I can now delete this file as well, so it becomes very clean. Let's keep this manifest. We are basically done with the public folder as well, and going to the main folder that we usually change the files in this file, in this folder. So I see that's in index CSS. It's not refactored yet. So let's rename it to SCSS instead of CSS. Once you change this SCSS, for WebStorm is very smart, and it will go and refactor it basically. So wherever it's being used, it'll change it to this file, SCSS. So for example, when I changed it app.scss, it came here and it changed this import as well. So make sure that when you rename these files, you go back and rename them in the inside of the app.tsx file as well. So this way it knows what to import. So right now, the files that we have in SRC, it's the app.scss, which is clean. There's nothing inside of it. There's a test file for this app.tsx that we will go over the unit tests later. This is for purely testing our application. This is the next step of our development. And we have app.tsx, which is very simple. As you can see, it has this structure. It imports React, it imports our styles, and it also has a return function, basically render function, that has a content of this small view, which is hello world. And in index.scss, we have some basic and fundamental styles. For example, if you want to offset your settings to, for example, has only 0 margin for the application and then style based on each individual page, this is the file that you usually add your style. We can just remove these styles as well, but these are very useful. Basically has some margin 0 for everything for your application. It starts from 0, but if for some page that you need more a different or customized margin, you can just add it. It uses font family, basically Apple system, and it has some backup. As you can see, these are the font name and base, so on and so forth, that you can go over. Basically, font family is the main CSS styles that is being used in this file. The next one is index. We will go over this file later, but it's basically the fundamental
structure of React that if you want to run a React application, this is basically you have to do. You have to define a root. Where is the root? It gets the document element root, which was inside of the index file. So if I go to the index file and I see this div, I see the ID of this div is root. And when I come back to this index, I see that it gets this root and attach the React application inside of it. So, and our app, which is basically we import here, is this file, is this app.tsx. So we add this file inside of this index.tsx. So whatever we put inside of here in the middle, it will reflect to the view. And that's the way that we render React application. For any application, even the complex application, we will have the same setup here. So we will create a first top layer app, and then inside of this app, it could include different pages, multiple pages. But in this case, it has this app, and we can just see the content of this app right here. So it's very clear to what is going on here. And the next file is setup test. As I said, this app test, we have it here. This is for the unit tests. For some of the setup of these tests, we can just have some configurations here. We don't need it here for now, but just it's good to be here. We can later add some configurations as well. I'll keep it here. Git ignore, if you're familiar with Git process, it doesn't relate to React development, but usually if you're using source control, this is the file that you add to not track some of the files that you don't need. I initially mentioned that we don't track of node module inside of the source control, so this is the file for it. I'll not go over the details of it. I already talked about package.json. The main part is dependencies and the scripts. So the dependencies we talked about, we're using third-party libraries, but the scripts are the ones that we use for running the application. If you remember, we use npm start. So npm start starts the application. npm build is for the time that you're building the application, and it will create the build folder in your application. We don't need it now. I'm just telling you to just briefly know what is going on here. npm start test is basically running the test that you added in your project. In this case, if I just run that npm start test, it will start this test. And then what other script do you have? Eject is I never use this eject, but if you want to customize your application and you want to not use create React app anymore, and customize your builder and stuff, you will use this eject. But I never used it, so you don't need it. You just have to use start, test, build, and you can add more scripts here. But for now, we're using only start, so just don't confuse yourself. And we'll talk about the rest of the configurations here, but for now, just know the dependencies and script. That is enough. Package.log.json, we never modify this file manually. It will automatically create for us when we install some of the packages and dependencies. It will modify this file as well, but it's necessary to be inside of the Git or source control. And then readme file. This is basically if you want to have some documentation for your application, you can add it here. Currently, it just adds npm start, like what does it do, npm test, what does it do, and basically all of the documentation that you need for your application. If you add more script, you can add it here. If you have some complexity for your application and you want to document it somewhere, this is the place that you can add some human readable. It's like the instruction for your application. If you want to later use for other people and they can see it and read and understand, you can just add some notes here for later. And the last file, but not least, is tsconfig. If you have some configuration for your TypeScript, it will come here. By default, it adds these stuff, but later you can add more stuff or remove stuff. I never changed this file here. It adds by its default. For now, it is good, but it's good to know that there's some config file that you can change for your TypeScript. That was all for the first project. We later add more folders here once we add more complex applications, but for now it's very important to understand that I can go one more time on over it, and you can read it one more time and watch this tutorial again, that for React we need to have this structure. It gets the element root and it attached the React a component to it, and basically we create the new file, and this file is also imported inside of this index, and we can start our application by adding anything that we need for the view. That was all, and stay tuned. We will add more complex application. They will just started, and we'll have more fun. Have a great day.